Hello, and welcome to Wired for Change. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is very top of mind for setting up the conditions for success for, I think, what we're seeing as an acceleration of innovation, scaling, and growth in Canada when it comes to digital and technology overall. As Canada makes some bold investments in AI, for instance, and other technologies, are we missing something when it comes to setting those conditions for success? Is there something that we need in order to fully leverage some of these investments that we're making for the future when it comes to our people and our capabilities and our capacity for truly leveraging some of these technologies? Today, I'm very happy to have with us Terri Griffith. Terri is the Keith Beedie Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser University's Beedie School of Business. Terri, thank you so much for joining us.
Amy, thank you.
You recently wrote an article or published an article in the Hill Times called The Hidden Skills Gap in Canada's Innovation Strategy: Why Technical Infrastructure and Digital Literacy Aren't Enough to Solve Our Innovation Paradox. And I was fascinated by this content that you've put out there. And I think it's something that is very important to be aware of. And I'd like to explore that a little bit with you today.
I'm looking forward to sharing the ideas, especially with you and your audience. And it's a topic that I think matters no matter if you're talking about a business organization, a nonprofit, our early education systems. I think all those different levels really could gain from sort of a shift in how we think about going about our day, going about our work.
Amazing. And I know you've spent a lot of time researching old and new technology and organizational design and how this impacts teams, and you've advised lots of companies. And so, how did you come about this skills gap, as you call it? How did you discover this problem, or how did you first see it?
Yeah. I have always been interested in how people come to use new technologies, not only how they come to use them, but how they come to even think about what they are.
Mm.
And lots of research goes on in that realm. In fact, starting from the 1950s, we knew that the world wasn't about silver bullets, that the world is far more complex. I think everyone could agree with that. But that if we think about socio-technical systems, we're going to be better off. Most organizational changes, most innovations don't do the things that people hope they would. See about a 25% success rate, and that's terrible. And it's not because they're bad ideas. It's because how we put them into play is not so great. And there's this idea called a silver bullet fallacy
Mm.
that, oh, look at this shiny thing. If I just have that, or if I hire this one person, or if I change to this new approach, this one change, that things will be better. But that's not how the world works. And so I was so interested, and here we are in the 1950s. People come to understand this thing, but I think they branded it terribly. When was the last time you heard the phrase socio-technical systems? I'm going to go do that today. I mean, yeah, it's just not a win. So that has become something I've focused on at least since the early 2000s, is how to help people come to understand that it's not just random. Sometimes I'll talk about it's not evolution, how we end up using, say, AI today, or how we started using laptop computers back in the day, but it's really about intelligent design. But if I say it's about intelligent design, what am I supposed to be designing? And can I play with my squish?
Yes.
All right.
Bringing it in
Bring
early.
it in early. Let's just go for it right from the start. I think about organizations as this, something that's flexible. There's no one right way to play with this thing. There's no one right way to get things done. But if I try to just change one piece and I hold all that tight, even a strong toddler is going to know that breaks. We don't want to do that. Instead, we need to let things shift together. So the things we need to shift together are our talent, our technology, and our technique. And then those have to be aligned to the times that we're working in and toward the target that we want. And so I call those the 5 Ts. I'm not sure if that's better branding than socio-technical systems, but I know it can't be any worse. Yeah. So that's really what got me into it. The idea that so many great ideas fail when we put them into practice or when we attempt to put them into practice. And why is that? And I think it's because humans have a lot of biases about how they think about the world. And one of them is, oh, if I just change this one thing, things are going to be great. And especially if it's something shiny, AI would certainly be the example of the day. If it's something shiny, I can get my board to support it. If I'm in a nonprofit, I can get my philanthropy connections to support it. If I'm in a school, can I get the parents to support it? If it's shiny enough, sure. But if I don't do those other things, if I don't support whatever that one main idea is with the other two of the talent, the technology, or the technique, I'm probably not going to get the result I want. And if I haven't aligned them towards a particular target and been conscious of the times I'm living in, right now our political times would be the main thing we might want to be thinking about, then I don't get to where I want to go. And so how to help people see that has really been something I've focused on for quite a while.
And that's something that really resonates with me because I get asked for shiny things all the time. And I've put together pitches based on
Yeah.
shiny things. But really, it's the other things, even though that might not be as sexy or as easy or as attractive kind of terms of
Mhm.
thinking, those are the pieces that you really need. And so sometimes I find myself in a position, or others find themselves in a position where they've undersold some of those other pieces that are needed. And it's interesting that you mentioned that this silver bullet kind of idea, it goes way back. So when you talk about the research that you're doing now or the gap that we're talking about now, it just in
Mhm.
context of so much is changing because of AI and other technology. So that's why now, or is there another reason why now?
Yeah. I think why now just because maybe people are stopping and listening a little bit more. I think we've gotten to the point, again, AI is different just in the pace of change. If you think about when personal computers came on the scene, we had years before they were on everybody's desks.
Mhm.
And then we had years before everybody had a laptop or a tablet in meetings. And so humans could keep up with those adjustments. And our introduction to AI took place, I want to say, in a 2-week period. The explosion was in that 2 weeks right at the end of 2022. And every day, one of the major platforms is shifting. I'm sure every 15 minutes or even faster, someone has got a new tool that's going to use some AI capability. And that is not manageable.
No.
So that's why I think today may be the moment where people know they have to make some kind of an adjustment and they can't get away with however they were doing things in the past.
And would you say that many organizations today just weren't built with the idea of being able to change so quickly either as part of it,
Oh, yeah.
right?
And I'm thinking back to a presentation I was giving to a very successful law firm.
Mhm.
And I made the point that the leadership got there because of how things were in the past. Maybe the leadership is concerned that how things are going into the future isn't going to be as great a fit for them. And I remember the CEO of that law firm, in a joking way, but being a little upset about me laying it out that starkly. So, if we think about an organizational system as something that is built to make things be efficient, which they certainly try to do, but few of them try to be efficient and evolving constantly. And so it's a hard thing for them.
It's true. It's so true. I've said it as well during transformation. Often, like the behaviors, not just from leadership, but from many folks, like all over the organization, the
Mhm.
behaviors that got us to here aren't the behaviors that are necessarily going to move us forward in terms of transformation. So it's such an interesting thing. It's easy to say, but hard to put into practice in terms of how you change it.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about what's changing and what's staying the same. As part of your article points to some of the bold investments that we're making as a country
Mhm.
to innovate innovate and scale and grow. And I know that Ottawa's just announced $7 million going into 6 kind of AI companies like locally and all, which
Mhm.
is great to see. But what happens if we don't stop and think about like the skills gap or this ability that you're pointing to?
Then I don't wanna be as extreme as a bridge to nowhere, but we have to spend the big money on the infrastructure. That is absolutely the case. So I was really careful as I planned that article to be in full support of the
Mhm.
money that is going in that direction because data centers cost money and compute capability costs a lot and it's hard to get access to. At the same time, people are saying, oh, I don't have access to enough people. It's not even necessarily the particular coding skills that they might need, it's the way of thinking that I think they need. And we need education to be more in support of that. We certainly are in support of writing, we're in support of math skills, and those are fantastic, but we're missing a little bit on if I'm gonna make a decision, am I really thinking about the system that decision has to be placed within? And I can go back to my squish again and say, as soon as a kid gets a cell phone, they're having to make relatively complex decisions. Carrying around my plastic truck, taking it into the sandbox, worst case, I'm gonna forget it. But in that instance, if I'm now I've got a cell phone and I heard somewhere where tablets, because even tiny folks have tablets. They
Yes.
may not be making decisions about when they're gonna pull that out of their stroller or not. But the kids who actually do have cell phones, it's not just do I take it into the sandbox, do I take it to the beach, but okay, do we understand that this is an investment? Do we understand as the kids get older about social media and the different kinds of things they might see there? That's a complex world. Again, so different than certainly when I grew up and the kinds of toys and decisions I was making about those. So if we can just find interesting ways to help the youngest kids think about the technology, their own skills and preferences, and then good and bad ways of using those things or the technique aspect, then that means we're gonna have high school kids who are making better decisions. We're gonna have college students making better decisions. We're gonna have entrepreneurs coming to not only understand how to build their own business, but also how their business will be perceived by others because they'll have that more complex but appropriate picture of the world. So it's not just that I built this great thing, and of course, if I build it, they will come, but in the instance of an entrepreneur, how am I gonna market it? Is it something that's actually gonna solve a problem for someone or give them great benefit? How do I get that systems thinking? Or in the academic work where we, of course, have to really speak back to that 1950s research because we're always standing on the shoulders of others. We talk about it as systems savvy. And so the combination of, again, the talent, the technology, and the technique, but how do we bring those together and let people understand that there's no one right answer? And maybe we don't want to change everything all at once. Small bites is a good strategy. Being more experimental, all very good plans for dealing with new technologies as they come into the workplace, new technologies as they come into education. And that's the part that I think is missing. If the government is spending millions of dollars on infrastructure, then can we spend some on helping people not just learn to code? I think in the article I talk about that's teaching someone how to fish for a particular species. They say give a person a fish they eat for a day, teach them to fish they eat for a lifetime. And even in the case of coding, that's a relatively specific capability. And I would rather that be taught in a context of this is one thing we do now, and even today we don't do it the same way we did it a year ago, especially with AI supports for coding and things like that. In the grant world, where we write for a grant, one of the things we're always required to do is to say, how will you share the results of this research? We're going to pay for you to do this work, but how are you going to share that? You can't just keep it to yourself. You can't just keep it in the academic ivory tower. And so you have to have a plan. I think we also need a plan for how are we not just going to teach people how to leverage this particular piece of research, but how can we teach them this more general skill as well? And coming up with strategies on how to do that in every kind of context and at every level of education is something that I think could be really exciting to do.
Help us to understand. So you've called it system savvy, and we've
Yeah.
talked about
That's
kind of
probably not
the
great
truck.
branding either.
We need a branding person in here
We really do.
to help us out. Maybe you could help describe a little bit more what it would look like in the context of thinking about a new technology for a company, for instance. Does
Mhm.
it look like to be able to apply this ability to consider, if I have it right, the
Mhm.
technology and sort of the process part around it and the adoption and people and the impact side of it as well, perhaps? What does that look like? It's a hard
Mhm.
thing to
Yeah, and
help
I'm
people
looking
understand.
around. As a professor, the first thing I look for is a whiteboard.
Oh, yeah, of
I'm
course.
thinking, could I
We'll
use a
get that in our
Sharpie on their
next one.
windows? Probably not.
I'll
The
get that for next time.
yeah, the easiest way to think about it is to draw a five-pointed star like you do in school, right?
Mhm.
And then make sure you connect all 5 points of that star. Lay those 5 T's on it. So I always put target on the top, and then I'm going to go around clockwise to the talent, the technology, technique, and then the times, because the times is really what connects us to everything else. And at that point, I ask people to do an audit.
Okay.
So think about what you're doing right now. All right, what's your target? And sometimes we stop right there because they go, oh, I'm not entirely sure. And we'll focus on the target for a while. And then once we get rolling, continue that audit. So what are you bringing? What skills are you bringing? What skills do you wish you had? What about the talent around you and their skills? All right, we've got that nailed down. How about the technology tools that you either have or you could get access to? Okay, got that part. How about your workflow? What's the general process about how you do this thing as you try and achieve that target? And then have your times changed or are they pretty stable? And for some companies, maybe in retail, it's different holiday seasons or sales.
Okay.
Maybe it's a company and they're ending their fiscal year and they've got to think about something, a school year, when's the test coming, things
Mhm.
like that. So you get them to do that audit. And then once you have that, you say, now let's look at where you want to be. And how are you going to approach the target? Are you going to keep it the same and just try and go after it in a slightly different way? And I spend a lot of time asking people to draw on the linkages because,
Mhm.
again, they're tied together. And if I
Mhm.
make an adjustment in one, what are the adjustments I'm going to make in the other ones? And at that point, the creative process starts. You can start talking about more general change techniques. I tend to talk about negotiated change as being the easiest way to think about getting change to happen. Top-down change is not a great plan.
Okay.
Doesn't tend to work. If I'm standing in a speaking grill, I'll say, what's the one person who wants to be changed? And that'll take people a while, and they'll sit and think, and I'll go, a wet baby, and even the baby cries.
Right.
Change is not pleasant. I don't sit around saying, oh, what do I want to change in my life today? I like how things are going.
Right.
But getting folks just in that process, so it's not that there's even one approach, like you have to learn this equation.
Mhm.
No, you just need to stop, look, and listen. Little kids are taught that around the world. It's either a truck that's going to get you or a train, something. And do that stop, look, listen moment. Okay. Now negotiate towards some mix of those variables that you think is going to be good for you and the other people who are involved. And if you think about the best negotiations, first of all, you have to involve the people. Again, top down is not a great strategy. So I'm going to figure out who is going to be affected by this. All right. Those are my stakeholders. for each of our stakeholders, then what are the issues that are on the table in this change? And those 5 T's give us a great start, right? Just write that down. I tend to use a spreadsheet so I can take my stakeholders across the top. I can put my issues that are on the table categorized by their 5 T's down the side. And then inside each of those, what are the different things that could happen? And I try to get 3 to 5 of those. Some people are very ambitious and get many more, but I'm going 3 to 5 is good. And then for each stakeholder, be thinking about how much is that stakeholder going to value if that outcome happens. I might like flexible work. I do.
Mhm.
But other people may say, no, that's the worst thing. So my value would be high if we decided on a flexible work strategy. But this other person would say, no, I'm going to be really unhappy. You're going to be more unhappy than I'm going to be happy. How do we make some trade-offs to make it work out for all of us? Your basic integrative negotiation. It's not so much a push or a pull, but how do we problem solve to get to something that works? And if I've done that, one, I've learned how to negotiate. And now I'm also thinking in 5T, implementing my new technology, my new workflow, my new skill set, and in a way that's pretty generalizable. You don't have to be a tech guru. You don't have to be the best leader on the planet. But you just have to understand different people are going to see the world different ways. Different uses of this technology are going to play out in different ways. What's the best starting point for us? Maybe measure it, right? Because I do like an experimental approach. Maybe measure that, and then we'll see how we're doing in whatever time frame is appropriate.
Hmm.
And then we'll come back and do it all over again. If we did that, I think we wouldn't have 25% success rate. Maybe we can flip that around and have 75% success rates. But what do you think? Do you think is that something that the people you talk with could get around, get behind?
That's a great question. And so one of the reasons I started this podcast was actually to get at that. Why are we only 25% of success? We're investing a lot at the people's time. People burn out trying to transform or innovate or scale. How can we make it easier for people to figure out how to do things, how to succeed in the things that they're trying to do? Because there's such an impact on society when we're able to do that successfully, because generally they're all good things that we're trying to accomplish. I agree. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to work that out. I think that perhaps from an executive standpoint, watching someone go through this or watching stakeholders go through that, I don't know that it's something that's universally appreciated given time and resources. Right. So I think it's something it's not as linear of a path as some people might like. I think it is one that is more likely to be successful. So perhaps that's something that needs to be messaged or understood at more organizations, and for people to understand in what situation like this is important, or just that it's generally more important to think like this more frequently over time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, and I can tell you multiple examples where senior executives went, oh yeah, that's all well and good, but still, I'm just going to tell them what to do.
Or I want the shiny thing.
Yeah, or I want that shiny thing. And if you can have the shiny thing, just do the other things too. What would happen if all of a sudden teams are this way in North America, right? Teams were not the way North American organizations were designed until the Japanese and the Toyota method showed that teams working together could be better than a department full of individuals. All of a sudden, when people finally got behind that idea, you start to see the educational system have more of a team working together. Let's the table do some homework and let's teach each other how to get this work done. And we've had enough generations come through since then that now, if you try and put together a team in an organization, it's a very different thing than back in the late 70s.
No, absolutely. And then I guess, which leads me to the question of when you're thinking about the system savvy and you're building a team to execute on something that you're trying to accomplish, a target, does everyone need to have this skill? Is it like a way of working that everyone needs to understand or be an expert in? Or can you have some folks who are more able to facilitate this kind of thinking and then others follow along? What are your thoughts on
I don't have research that tells me if it's a linear benefit or not. I'm going to say that the more the different members of the team have that same language, have that same approach, the better off you are. I wrote a book in 2012 called The Plugged In Manager, and it was about stop, look, listen, mix, and negotiate. And then the third portion of that was share. And the reason the sharing was so important was not only was it going to be helpful if other people knew what was going on, but if you developed a language that you all knew, then it wouldn't be such a big startup cost every single time you start a new project. So imagine you're the facilitator and you have to teach people and bring them along every single time versus, oh no, this is just how we do things here. And again, if we start early enough, in a few generations, everybody will be thinking that way. And I cannot believe that the technology is going to slow down. So again, it's a time where it may be even more important to be getting that skill set into everybody's thinking so that they're prepared for that even more complex world to come.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your research and what you're working on now.
Oh, we're having a fantastic time because we think AI really can help us a
Mhm.
lot. Colleague John Sawyer and Scott Poole and I had created a test for system savviness, but it's a very time-consuming thing to do. People have to read a scenario, they've got to rank some possible outcomes, they have to do this multiple times. Not easy. And you have to keep updating your scenarios to make it work out. And so my colleagues here at SFU, CK Kaligatla, and I started working on this idea about how could we use machine learning and what we already knew from our prior scenarios to figure out from people's work product how system savvy they are. And to be able to do that, given they've already done the work, now we can do the analysis. And so we started with comments from the New York Times, and we were able to code those both for sentiment and then system savvy. And we focused on ones that were about how so many people had to start working from home at the start of COVID. So we had a context where everybody was having to change their technology, their talents, their techniques, and it wasn't going great for everyone, if you think back to those times. And using some shirk money, so we had some governmental support to do this, we've been able to show that there's a connection between how system savvy the comments are and the positiveness of the sentiment. And so the reasoning there is the more I have an understanding of the complexities of the talent, the technology, and the technique, then maybe I will be less upset about these shifts. And so that's a very early stage
Mm.
metric. We're now digging a little bit deeper and training that model a little bit harder. And we've started to look at the Enron database. For researchers, the Enron lawsuit certainly doesn't make up for the terrible human cost of that company's bad actions. But because it all went to court, we have all their emails, we have a lot of their work product, and we're just starting to be able to do it in a more organizational setting, to be able to show that we can track someone's system savvy and then look at the quality of their work, and hopefully that'll be a predictive thing. If that's the case, then we've already got a website set up, not live yet, where you could put your own work product in and get your own system savvy index back. And we're thinking about organizations could do that to figure out who should be training whom. You know, are there particular areas where you're really good? Are there particular areas in the organization where you should focus more training? And just help people focus in a little bit more. And if I've done training, am I seeing shifts in that system savvy index? So we have another proposal in working on the deeper details of that and making sure it's actually reliable and valid.
Wow.
Yeah, you saw I got all excited about that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
I'm excited too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so the idea would be within your own organization, you can make decisions about where to focus
Mhm.
that train. Would
Mhm.
that take the format of a course or would it be like hands-on kind of
Yeah.
practice? What would that look like potentially?
Yeah,
I'm just imagining.
what I have in my head is workshop based. And another beauty of AI is you can personalize and customize workshops that we always would have had be pretty generic in the past,
Mm.
but we don't have to have them be so generic anymore because it's so much easier to twist and tweak them to fit a particular organization. And if you do those workshops over time, people can start shifting how they do their own work. Other scholars have done a lot of research on something called job crafting or work crafting. And the finding there is when you start to make adjustments to your own work, maybe which tools you use or what you do early part of the day versus later part of the day, where you do your work, that work is better for you as an individual, but your work also is typically better, but people don't have those skills. And the weird thing about it, and this comes from others' research, is if you just ask someone to design work, if you just give them a blank slate and say, okay, design this, they go towards a very robotic approach. And I'll joke and say, is it because everybody watched Cheaper by the Dozen, which was all about efficiency?
Right.
Why is this so ingrained? And only people who've actually been trained in how to design good work take that more, I'll say, more system savvy approach. They seem to be thinking in 5T more. They're probably not using that phrase. They're thinking about it that way. Instead of having efficiency being the only thing, they think about their preferences when they have more energy, when they have more focus, and they make adjustments to their work that make more sense.
Well, a couple questions. What does success look like? So when you're thinking in terms of a system
Mm.
based on system savvy, are you thinking about more than just like the target as it was initially defined? Are you thinking about the benefits for the entire system? Like how do you measure success that way?
Yeah, I'm somewhat lucky in that the most complex organization I have to work with are my colleagues and I as we go after one of these things. And it's clear there's no one target. The organization itself has to be successful enough to survive if that's what we're hoping to do. That said, we don't want to be churning through our people. We want our people to be able to grow. And we know that promoting from within is a very good plan for most organizations. So I always sit back and I go, there is no one right answer.
Mhm.
It's really up to the people in that organization, the leadership, and then depending on the kind of company, how much that leadership also looks to the people within the organization and having them make those decisions about those targets. And even strategically, and this is where MBA education, I think, does have its shining moment, when they're making strategic decisions,
Mhm.
thinking about long-term success. And is long-term success about money right now, or is it about some money now, but making sure we're continuing to train the folks in our organization so they'll be ready for tomorrow? Hiring new people is very expensive
Mhm.
versus working with the folks you already have and know their skill set. So lots of different angles on it, and I think it's up to the organization and up to the people in the organization about how they pick success.
And I would imagine like the more investment of time that, and resources that you make in this system savvy kind of approach,
Mhm.
more visibility you could get to your risks as well and
Mm.
how that is held up against your risk tolerances as an
Mhm.
organization and to have those discussions, I imagine
Yeah.
as well. Interesting. And would you be able to contrast this a little bit for folks who are more familiar perhaps with design thinking,
Mm.
or lean, or other ways of approaching problems or
Yeah.
plans?
Yeah, design thinking and lean, far better terms in terms of marketing.
Right.
Although my favorite one is Six Sigma. I
Yes.
go, everybody
It's
knows
such a
about
good
Six
like term.
Sigma. How can I possibly get close to that? But thinking about lean, lean is absolutely aligned. And the ideas of design thinking are absolutely aligned. I teach design thinking in my courses and talk about that lightweight experiment approach. You've got to get away from your desk. You've got to get outside. You've got to be with the clients, the communities, the folks that need this thing or that you think need the thing. And then how are you going to test that without using a survey or even an interview? You
Mhm.
know, what are you going to be able to do that will show them making a choice? And so have that be more experimental in that regard. And that's a tough one. I
Mhm.
taught a class to some of SFU's engineers just
Yeah.
last week,
Oh, yeah.
and it's rough. They
In what
they're
way?
they're very good at technical experiments. We'll design this and we'll change this thing and we'll measure the output of the the energy system that they were working on. So they're very clear on experimentation that way. A few of them kept leaning into the idea of a survey, and I said, I'm fine with surveys if you've had at least a 10-week college level course on survey design, because it's just too easy to manipulate survey results or to not write a survey in a way that the results will be what you think you're seeing. I said, so I'm not such a fan of the survey, but how instead can you either create a situation where people have to choose to join you to learn more? Or even things as simple, people with the little tear tags on a lamppost. How many people took your tear tag? Were they that excited? That's actually a step to actually grab that piece of paper. Now, maybe they never call the number or click on the QR code, but it's that first step. So I think it's highly aligned. And when I talked about drawing your 5-pointed star and then having your current one and the one that you hope to have in the future, what's that first leap of faith assumption that you're thinking about? How could you test it and then take your next step? So again, small bites is a term we've used today, negotiating that change, renegotiating. I think all those ideas are supportive of one another, not just aligned.
Fun. And it makes sense that, especially with where technology is going, that we would need added sort of tools in our arsenal or mindsets in
Mhm.
our within our reach to be able to equip us to move forward with some of these changes that are moving very fast, as you had said in the beginning of the podcast.
Mm.
It's exciting stuff, I have to say. And I really appreciate what you're saying. I'm a bit of an odd duck as an engineer who has expanded into design thinking and user-centered design for a number of years and then strategy. So I can fully appreciate how you're comparing them and how aligned all of this is as well. So
Mhm.
that's good news.
Yeah, yeah.
I think. I guess when I think about how to design teams for the future, it would make sense that because, as you said, technology, the pace of it isn't slowing down and change will continue to come.
Mhm.
It's a capability that you'll want to grow in your organization, for the foreseeable future. It's not
Mhm.
like a bring someone in to do it and then have them leave kind of thing. It's something that you're going to want to ingrain in your organization, quite likely. Does that sound about right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That the mindset is the thing you want to be. I I was gonna say the mindset is the thing you want to be stable, and I think I still agree with that. I
What's the hesitation?
Yeah, I just because I don't know what's in the future, and I do think if I look back and I do sometimes even go into prehistoric examples in the beginning of papers. If I look back over what I know of human history, it's never been the case that a silver bullet approach was gonna be the best one. Yeah, I can't come up with examples where I guess one example I have used in the past is if I'm in a life or death scenario, if somebody calls out the right answer, we're gonna do it. We're not gonna sit around and talk about it.
Right.
No,
We're not
if
gonna draw a
someone
star.
yeah, if somebody says, "Get down," I'm going to do that thing. But in organizations, it is rare. We may think sometimes that, oh, it has to be a of the minute decision, but I think most of the time it's not. And that one pause, that stop, look, listen, how can I mix a decision, taking into account that talent, technology, and technique, and align it towards the thing we want to get done? It's going to be a better outcome than saying, ah, this one new thing. It's gonna solve my problem. Yeah.
And then I guess being open to additional inputs. It's not a once and done kind of piece either.
Yeah.
It's maybe you were wrong about that one piece that you thought that's how it would impact users or how the policy would be adjusted and it would work, but it didn't work. And so it's that constant kind of experimentation and learning.
And being okay with being
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe it's something about being in my career for so long. We get told we're wrong all the time, and
Mhm.
sometimes incorrectly told we're wrong. If I'm thinking about how the journal publication process works. But I have to always be open. Running an experiment where you're certain of the answer, that's a meaningless experiment. It wasn't worth the time it took to run it. I need to run an experiment where it could come out at least a couple of different ways. Otherwise, why bother? And knowing that, you probably had a thought about which way it was going to go, but the data is going to be the data. So that is a mindset too.
It is.
That experimental approach.
Why don't we have more of that mindset though? Why
I
is that still such a challenge, I
Yeah.
wonder?
I think if we look at a lot of the studies, the Nobel Prizes given in heuristics and biases, we're human. I'm thinking about Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I think that book certainly does a better job talking about it than I will. So, yeah. So we're human. And as I was telling somebody the other day, I go, the organizations change, the technology change. The one thing that doesn't change is the fact that we're human and we're having to deal with things that are just so different. So my predictions, people used to say, oh, you study email, you study collaboration systems. Can't you pick a technology to study? I'm like, the technology will always be changing. But how humans respond, how humans come to learn what is new and valuable or not about that new technology, that process stays pretty stable. And we can help people do that better.
Nice. And so while we wait for your research, is there any advice you have for organizations who are trying to work through change, now?
Sharing the biggest, juiciest piece of low hanging fruit I see is having people come together and share what they've tried and how it worked, right? It might have failed. It might have been fantastic. We have lots of research showing people are absolutely using AI, but not a lot of them are sharing how they're using AI. And that's partially because they'll be perceived as lazy, their bosses told them they shouldn't use it, all sorts of reasons. But the one thing that organizations could do to really both support their organization and support the people in it is have them share the things they're doing in their work. What hasn't worked, what did work, don't keep reinventing the wheel, and have moments to talk about, even if it is, oh, we really wish you weren't using that particular tool. Why?
That's perfect. And that's really one of the things that I'd love to do with this podcast is to really have people kind of share lessons learned and things that worked
Hmm.
and didn't work. And so we
Hmm.
can make that more accessible for more people as they work through these projects.
Yeah.
One thing I'd ask if you could share, do you have any success stories? And it could be in any industry or any kind of application where someone was able to apply the system savvy and it worked out really well for them.
I'm thinking of examples of the many amazing people I got to interview. Engineering projects. So, engineering project managers that have this capability tend to have better projects, more satisfied employees. Things just go better for them.
Mm.
The thing that's funny is the one person I'm thinking about, how they claimed they got that skill is that their mother was a wedding planner. And that's probably exactly what I did when this gentleman told me this thing. My mom was a wedding planner, and that was my summer job, was helping her.
Oh, neat.
And he says, as you might guess, people at their best and at their worst, things going well, things just falling apart. He said, but I could always watch her, and the ways she would find a solution really taught me not only about how to manage people in stressful situations, but how to find a solution, how to cobble things together just to get it done,
Mm.
fix the thing. And then he was an engineer for Boeing. And he said, "I use those same skills all the time." And he goes,
Amazing.
"I don't think I would have learned that, and certainly not at such a young age, had I not been in that experience."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Ah, it's
It's
fantastic."
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that, and I know that you will help us to build up the skill as well, since not all of our parents are wedding planners
Mm,
necessarily. But I think you and I talked, earlier, and there are lots of different ways that people come to this, but there are ways for us to all learn them as well, and
mhm.
it is something that can be learned. So, really appreciate that. Any last messages for our viewers?
I just hope you have the chance to stop, look, and listen and find your own ways to negotiate that change. And I can unabashedly say I do have a blog at terrigriffith.com. And in preparation for today, I'd been planning to start a newsletter. And so
Amazing.
you were my impetus for getting that off the ground.
Oh, that's an honor for me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It had been on the back burner, and this was a chance to share.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to post a link
Oh,
to that as
thank
well
you.
when I post this episode. So thanks so much for joining us today, Terry. Really learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did as well, and really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us for another episode of Wired for Change.